Final Reflection and Course Synthesis by Parkyn. As teachers, it is important for us to consider our students' backgrounds and how they impact their learning. In language and learning in multilingual classrooms, a variety of push factors are described, including war, lack of education, and employment opportunities. These are just some of the circumstances that cripple immigrant and refugee families. The social-emotional impact that these conditions have on children's development are real. It is my belief that we need to educate our students on the social injustices of the world so that they can better understand these language learners' backgrounds. This can be done through culturally rich literature like Eve Bunting's Gleam and Glow, which details the story of a family trapped in a war-torn country. It may also be beneficial for a language learner to share their story if they feel comfortable, because it provides a first-hand account which students can connect to. A detailed academic background is essential for understanding language learners' behavior and success within the classroom. Information collected on previous schooling may include such things as literacy levels, lack of education, and behavior issues. All of this information can be used to diagnose current or future concerns. For example, in my practicum, a learner struggled with the daily routine of the classroom. It was found that this was due to a large gap in his schooling, which resulted in him no longer being able to sit in a classroom all day. Regularly scheduled movement breaks were implemented into this student's day, and this helped regulate his attention. At the reception center, I found it interesting that they asked the newcomers to write letters. The first letter, written in English, was an introduction to their new teacher, telling them all about their favorite subjects, interests, and any other important information. This letter could be used as a work sample in order to gauge the student's strengths and weaknesses in writing. This information could then be translated into individualized instruction, such as learning about punctuation or grammar. The second letter, written in their native language, was addressed to their friends back home, and it was to detail their experience in Canada thus far. It is important that the student's home dialect is utilized in the language acquisition process, as it serves as a bridge, enabling them to participate more effectively in school activities while they are learning English. This could be as simple as allowing the language learner to jot down ideas in their first dialect before writing in English. An overall understanding of the student's Alberta English Second Language benchmark level will aid in the language acquisition process as well as assessment practices. If a student is a beginning English language learner, then their language acquisition process is going to look different than an extending learner. This may include utilizing different methods of instruction or focusing on specific benchmark characteristics. For example, a beginning language learner may focus more on utility words, while an extending learner is focusing on using a broad range of words. The first day of school for a newcomer can be intimidating, especially when dealing with new surroundings. This is why it is important that they enter a classroom that has a welcoming environment. The student's first impression of the classroom should be comfortable and inviting. This may include being welcomed into the classroom with a greeting or a phrase in their home language, as well as signs in their native dialect. It is through this first impression that the student will feel comfortable learning and engaging in the language acquisition process within the classroom. It is important that the teacher knows and understands the stages of cultural accommodation for English language learners. In the beginning, the student will be experiencing euphoria, which is an initial period of excitement about their new surroundings. This stage may cause the learner to be interested in learning as well as motivated and cooperative. The student will feel as though they have no problems adjusting to the new culture, and they will also be intrigued by both the similarities and differences in their new culture and home culture. However, it is also important for the teacher to understand that the student will move through various stages of cultural accommodation that all exhibit different behaviors. From the moment the student enters the classroom, they should be partnered with a peer. This classmate can be a fellow English language learner or a same home language partner. It is through this partnership that the student can begin to learn the routine of the classroom by mirroring their partner. For example, the language learner would be able to mirror their partner in order to understand when classroom and transitions are, or what the next steps in learning are. This partnership may also reduce anxiety in the English language learner because they immediately know what is expected of them, and they can begin to build relationships within the classroom. A school tour with their classroom partner will help in reducing anxiety for the newcomer. The tour will include important locations such as the classroom, library, and office, and it will also introduce the student to key personnel within the building. If a student has a unique schedule, then their classmate will ensure that they show them each of the classrooms that their classes will be in. For example, if a student has music class, then their peer partner will show them where the music classroom is. This will ensure that the student has a general understanding of the building. It is important that teachers understand that language acquisition is a process. Students are not sponges that can soak up information and understand it immediately. They need to engage in first-hand experiences with the language over the course of many years. It is through increased student involvement and participation in class that they can engage in meaningful activities and conversations with their peers that will add to their overall knowledge of the language. The personalization of instruction depends on how well you know your students. In particular, English language learners benefit from personalized instruction that plays upon their strengths and interests. For example, a beginning English language learner who learns best through hands-on activities would benefit from total physical response because they are physically involved in the language acquisition process. On the other hand, a more advanced language learner would benefit from the communicative approach, which allows them to take risks and engage in first-hand language experiences. It is important that teachers combine several models to facilitate a well-rounded language acquisition process. In an English language learner's first year or two, they will begin to sound fluent in day-to-day conversations. However, the process of learning academic language takes longer. In the early stages of language acquisition, students learn decoding and spelling alongside basic vocabulary and conversational fluency. English language learners require at least 5 years of catching up to their peers in literacy-related skills such as reading or writing. Students who have everyday language proficiency have the ability to maintain face-to-face conversations with their peers or adults. These learners have knowledge of high-frequency words, and this allows them to talk, read, or write about familiar contexts. They can use simple sentences and grammatical structures, as well as understand literal meanings of common words. Learners who exhibit everyday language proficiency are in the beginning stages of the language learning process. Academic language proficiency is characterized by the learner's ability to read social situations and identify when there is less opportunity for discussion. These students have knowledge of low-frequency words as well as an understanding of words that change their meaning based on context. They have an ability to talk, read, and write about abstract or unfamiliar contexts using complex sentences and grammatical structure. Students with academic language proficiency are closer to closing the language gap between themselves and their peers. The integration of a home language in the classroom can make English language learners feel more comfortable in the environment. The home language can be used as an English language learning strategy. In my practicum classroom, my mentor teacher allowed English language learners to write their assignments in their home language first and then translate them after. This strategy allowed the students to produce more successful and fluid writing pieces as they fully comprehended what they were writing. Once they had translated their work, my mentor teacher would have them edit it to see if there were any discrepancies between the two languages during the translation process. The Alberta English Second Language benchmarks are essential for language acquisition. It is through the benchmarks that student proficiency in language can be assessed in areas such as reading, writing, speaking, and listening, as well as curriculum can be modified for learners. For example, if a student struggles with grammar but excels with vocabulary, more emphasis can be placed on grammar instruction instead of vocabulary. Teachers can also utilize the website, which offers various work samples as examples of students' proficiency levels. These examples highlight each individual competency as it relates to the strands and in turn the student's proficiency level. It is through the Alberta English Second Language benchmarks that teachers can personalize and modify lessons and curriculum when necessary. It is through the integration of cultural resources in the curriculum that students see diversity as interesting but normal. In every classroom, teachers need to create a balance among cultural viewpoints which foster an increased understanding of customs and worldviews, as well as promote equality and human rights. Multiculturalism can be incorporated in all subject areas and should include students' home cultures as well as cultures unique to the classroom. For example, in English language arts, educators can create literature groups which examine different ethnic perspectives and traditions. Culturally rich literature is a good way to facilitate discussion in the classroom in which students feel comfortable sharing their ideas and experiences. In social studies, students can participate in intercultural projects which explore a variety of world cultures. For example, two students could work in a partnership to investigate Canadian culture as well as Chinese culture. At the end of the project, the students could identify what the similarities and differences were in the culture, as well as engage the class in a cultural activity from both. Each week, the class could engage in a Culture of the Week which highlighted an individual student's culture in the classroom. Each student would be responsible for preparing a short presentation on their home culture, as well as a cultural activity for the class to be engaged in. For example, a student with Chinese heritage may discuss the unique qualities of their culture and then engage in a traditional green tea ceremony with the class. In the classroom, multilingual resources can be utilized in order to spark a love of reading in English language learners. In my practicum classroom, my mentor teacher utilized audiobooks, which were in both Mandarin and English. The students could listen to the English version of a book first and then listen to the Mandarin version in order to make linguistic connections between both. Throughout the classroom, objects will be labeled in the student's home language as well as English. This will make the newcomer feel welcome, as well as serve a dual purpose of introducing the learner to the language acquisition process through high-frequency words. A word wall will be posted in the classroom that provides words in both the student's home language and English, as well as pictorially so that the student can begin to make connections between these words. Oral language engagement is an excellent resource for the entire classroom as well as English language learners. At a young age, students attain valuable characteristics through social interactions, such as helping, sharing, and appreciating others' opinions and ideas. During group work, learners engage in discussion that helps them clarify ideas, share their own knowledge, and collaboratively solve problems. In regards to English language learners, oral language opportunities are important interactions because they allow students to experiment with new words and learn from peer and teacher feedback. The foundation for literacy in English language learners is oral language. Social interactions provide L2 learners with the opportunity to listen to the language being used and use context to figure out what it means. In my practicum classroom, my mentor teacher frequently used the parent-share strategy in order to encourage oral language development. There is a variety of English language learners in this classroom, and they were always encouraged to partner with a native English speaker. It is through this partner that they receive modeling of the English language as well as safe pronunciation practice. Coelho discusses using small group work as a means of building English language learners' self-efficacy. This is especially important because language learners may feel intimidated to speak in front of the entire class. Instead, by placing them in a small group, they may feel more comfortable to take risks. However, these groups will only be successful if students understand what good group work looks like. For example, all learners must be introduced to group etiquette, which should include taking turns and not interrupting a peer. In my practicum class last semester, One of my peers led us in an activity to show us how terrifying it can be to learn a new language. Each of us received a word in a foreign dialect, and we were expected to read the word in front of the entire class. Most of us misread our words or used inappropriate accents for the dialect. Through this activity, I gained an appreciation of how hard English language learners work. If we had done this activity in smaller groups, I would have felt less intimidated to share. This is why I think it is important to keep in mind Elizabeth Coelho's strategies for improving language learners' self-efficacy, and why we should consider small group settings to make work less intimidating for them. For students with minimal language, it may be beneficial to incorporate manipulatives. In the textbook, Reju is a newcomer from India who is beginning to acquire new words and simple phrases in English. During mathematics, Reju does not have any contextual cues to gain the understanding of the subject. Instead of Reju just sitting in the math class and struggling to comprehend the language, he could work with a peer or volunteer using manipulatives. If the students are learning addition, then Reju could use the manipulatives and oral language to visually see and explain the mathematical theorems. For example, his peer may ask him what blocks add to 2, and then Reju could practice saying 1 block plus 1 block is 2. English language learners that have a large vocabulary in more than one language exhibit increased cognitive abilities. They have a higher level of reading comprehension as well as knowledge of grammatical patterns and common word forms. These skills can reduce the learning burden that language learners face by allowing them to identify word families. Students that have European language backgrounds have an advantage in vocabulary instruction because words have similar meanings in many different languages. However, this can also be a challenge as some words are false friends. It is through vocabulary instruction that learners can decrease the large word gap between themselves and their peers. As a learner, silent reading was always my favorite part of the day. It is my belief that my extensive reading increased my vocabulary and made me a better speller. This is why I would love to incorporate reading into my English language learners' daily schedule. My learners will be encouraged to read appropriate books that interest them. Elizabeth Coelho believes that through extensive reading, English language learners enhance their awareness of spelling as well as writing styles. As a direct instruction approach, I think it is necessary to pre-teach our students vocabulary words before we use them in a lesson or they encounter them while reading. In my practicum classroom, I utilized a strategy for my students to pre-read the chapter and highlight any unknown vocabulary. After they had identified unfamiliar academic words, I would have them predict their meaning in small groups or partnerships. The students were encouraged to look at the pictures and decode the context of the sentence in order to predict the word's meaning. After the students had discussed the words, we would engage in a large group discussion where I revealed the actual definitions of the words. It is important to consider that English language learners need a mixture of both direct and indirect vocabulary instruction. They need opportunities for extensive and intensive reading of materials at an appropriate grade level because it helps them with decoding and understanding written vocabulary. On the other hand, students also need opportunities to engage in direct instruction on academic language and vocabulary acquisition skills. This type of instruction is important because it will be more difficult for learners to decode academic language, especially in subjects such as science. In the video, Teaching Reading and Comprehension to English Language Learners, ping-pong activities are demonstrated. This strategy encourages students to work with a partner in order to verbally use key vocabulary words. It is through communication with their partners that English language learners are able to correctly pronounce and memorize vocabulary words. This also benefits their fluency while reading because they are able to identify academic words more easily. A ping-pong activity could begin with a simple prompt such as "I see a quadrilateral in the room." Reading can be a difficult task for English language learners. This is why it is important for teachers to make reading as engaging as possible for these students. One of the easiest ways to engage children in reading is to allow them to pick books that interest them. As long as students are picking books that are appropriate for their reading level, This is an excellent way to foster a love of reading and language learning. It is through a print-rich environment that students become familiarized with the basics of reading. Technology is another manner in which to engage English language learners in reading. There are technologies like Google Reader, which will read websites and books to students. This models the correct pronunciation of words for learners, as well as encourages them to take learning into their own hands. In the video, Teaching Reading and Comprehension to English Language Learners, they discuss the benefits of small group reading. In this activity, 2 native English speakers would be partnered with an English language learner. In the beginning, the native speakers would take turns reading aloud, while the English language learner tracked the content with their finger. As the ELL becomes more comfortable with reading, they would be encouraged to mouth the words while tracking. Finally, the last stage would include the integration of the ELL into the reading process. The integration of the home language in the classroom will be beneficial for writing. In particular, the learner will be encouraged to use their primary language in authentic writing experiences such as journaling. The use of their home language will deepen their comprehension and allow them to transfer complex ideas and vocabulary to English. It will also extend their content learning while allowing them to acquire the various components of the English language. In Elizabeth Coelho's video, Scaffolds for Writing, she discusses cloze activities. These activities are beneficial for English language learners because they provide them with maximum support for convergent thinking. It is important that these activities are modeled first in order for students to metacognitively understand the task and its process. Cloze activities should provide students with more words than the blanks because it ensures that they are critically thinking. It is through activities such as this that students are practicing their writing in an academic context. As English language learners become more proficient, they will need reduced support and more space for their own ideas in writing. Paragraph frames are a strategy that encourage students to think divergently while learning the basic structures of writing. This task is especially beneficial because students are provided with visual reminders of what the various components of a paragraph are. There are a variety of resources which will assist in achieving students' goals in each area. The Language and Learning in Multilingual Classrooms textbook is a valuable resource for teaching English language learners. It provides real-world strategies which students will connect to in areas such as reading, writing, vocabulary, and oral communication. It is through this textbook and others that a rich classroom environment for English language learners can be fostered. The Alberta English Second Language Benchmarks are an invaluable resource for assessing and understanding students' language proficiency. The various areas of the benchmarks create a well-rounded perspective into the language acquisition process. The website and its work samples are also beneficial for understanding the discrepancies between each individual student. The website Coloring Colorado provides a plethora of resources for English language learners. It is through this website that I already better understand how to welcome newcomers into the classroom. In the future, I could see the website's blog being especially beneficial because I will be able to get in contact with other teachers like myself. The Calgary Public Library is an excellent resource for engaging ELLs in reading. It is through a partnership with the CPL that students can engage in reading in both their home language and English. The library also provides books that are beneficial for professional development in teaching English second language. A connection with ELL parents in the community is essential for creating a multicultural and multilingual classroom environment. It is through these parents that authentic classroom activities can be established in the classroom. As well, these parents could be beneficial resources for newcomers who want a parent's perspective on the language acquisition process. Professional development in teaching English second language is essential for all teachers. It is through conversation with ELL experts that all teachers can learn. In schools, it may be beneficial to consistently consult with an ELL specialist in order to better understand individual students. Experts such as Elizabeth Coelho are another excellent resource as she provides videos that are packed with valuable strategies. One of the best resources in schools is other teachers. Throughout these teachers' careers, they have encountered a variety of English language learners and have utilized a plethora of strategies in order to engage them in learning. It is through these teachers' trials and tribulations that other educators can learn. Thank you for watching my digital story, and I hope you enjoyed.